something. Well, that kind of freaked me out, but if I had been Frederick the Great, that would have just been like an alarm clock. Maybe I would have snoozed it or something. Really, Frederick the Great every morning was awakened by his father to the fire of a cannon. These are the type of people we're dealing with in Absolutist Prussia, which was a precursor to modern Germany and one of the absolutist states of the 17th and 18th century. Now let's go back a little bit. What we know as Prussia originally started as Brandenburg, which was a part of the Holy Roman Empire, which Voltaire, of course, said was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. The Holy Roman Empire was more of a confederation, more of a glorified alliance, so to speak. Something that, consisted of a lot of various member principalities. As you can see here on this symbol of the Holy Roman Empire, you see the double eagle, which was also used by the Russians, and you see all of these different symbols of principalities and houses. So don't think of it like you'd think of an empire as much as just a loose confederation of princes in what is today Germany. Now, Brandenburg was in the northeast corner of the Holy Roman Empire, often referred to as the sandbox of the Holy Roman Empire for its sandy soil. Also, you can remember that during the 30 Years' War, a lot of people were playing around in Brandenburg. Keep in mind, this is where Gustavus Adolphus would have landed his troops in this area that was closest to Sweden. And Brandenburg was nothing special. Neither was Prussia, which was a sister state ruled by the same family that was in the early 17th century part of the Polish Confederation. As you can see here, these two territories were not even next to each other. It was over a 200-year conquest that Brandenburg and Prussia were united in what would eventually be known as Brandenburg-Prussia, later on Prussia. And Brandenburg-Prussia was ruled by the Hohenzollern dynasty, which we could call the Fredericks. These are a bunch of guys named Frederick and Frederick William. Most exams that you'll take won't ask you to differentiate between these Fredericks, but just a few of these guys. First of all, Frederick William, who was reigning in the 17th century in the wake of the 30 Years' War. Frederick William was known as the Great Elector. He wasn't even a king. He was an elector of the Holy Roman Emperor, somebody of some importance in the Holy Roman Empire, but let's not exaggerate it. This was just a very small state in the context of Europe. Certainly not a great power like France or Britain or even Spain at the time. His grandson, Frederick William I, the Soldier King, or Soldatenkönig? Maybe. We'll see. But anyway, the Soldier King, for those of us who are more comfortable with the English language than with German. Soldatenkönig. The Soldier King will really be the emphasis of what we'll be talking about today, one of the chief builders of the absolutist militaristic state. We'll talk about the Soldier King's son, Frederick the Great, in another lecture on enlightened absolutism. But keep in mind that Frederick the Great, the enlightened absolutist, friend of Voltaire, that he was also a king of Prussia. Frederick William I, the Soldier King, realized that if you wanted to be a great power in Europe, that the key was to have a strong military. And so militarism is what really differentiates Prussia from other absolutist states. Now keep in mind, Louis XIV and Peter the Great went to war and they built strong armies, but the Prussians did it better than anyone. Prussia was the 12th largest country in Europe in the 18th century and had the 4th largest army. So per capita, the army made up a much larger percent of the population than it did in any other European nation at the time. And not only did Prussia distinguish itself in the size of the army, but also in its efficiency. Armies from the United States to Russia used the Prussian drill model. Peter the Great, who was wanting to westernize his country, modeled this army that he was building after Prussia. George Washington, during the American Revolution, was thankful to have a guy named Baron von Steuben come and instruct his soldiers at Valley Forge in Prussian-style drill. So if anyone wanted to build a strong military at the time, they wanted to do it on the Prussian model. And Prussia was known at this time as the Sparta of the North. Not quite, but something like it, because Sparta was a militaristic state. It wasn't just a state where people kind of did the army as a job and then went home, but it was a state where people lived the army. It was part of life. And the Soldier King not only wants a strong army, but he wants to raise a militaristic country. And to do this requires discipline, not just in the military, but in the nation at large. Frederick William I banned comedies, operas, ballets. He saw all of this sort of thing as soft, while Louis XIV was very proud of being a ballet dancer and liked to show off his legs in pictures and that sort of thing. The Fredericks thought that this is soft stuff. This isn't how you raise a soldier country. And even more than that, that even the king should live a life of extreme discipline and despising luxury. For example, Frederick William I, in his political testament, in his advice to his son, Frederick the Great, said that all successful rulers keep God before their eyes and have no mistresses, or rather, whores. Let's just be honest about what they are, Frederick says. And they lead a godly life. So the objective of a king should be to lead a very simple life, not to be like Louis XIV, who had 14 illegitimate children by several mistresses. In fact, this woman here is one of Louis's many mistresses that he kept throughout his time as king. And we all know about the luxury of Versailles and at Louis's court. This wasn't going to be the case in Prussia. Everything was stripped down and all of the emphasis was on building this disciplined militaristic state. Of course, part of the reason why the Soldier King didn't have any mistresses might have been because he just wasn't interested in that sort of thing. He said that the most beautiful girl or woman in the world would be a matter of indifference to me. But tall soldiers, they are my weakness. Yes, that was just said. The Soldier King kept a regiment that was known as the Potsdam GIANTS. These guys were recruited from all over Europe, and the Soldier King just sent people out, go find some tall guys to put in my army. And he marched them around, drilled them, but treated them more like toy soldiers than anything. He never sent them to battle. Now, Frederick the Great would, but the Soldier King never put these guys in battles because these beautiful soldiers would get killed. So a lot of this was just for show, but these guys were really disciplined, really tall, and Frederick William was so obsessed with this that there were mothers in Prussia that would tell their sons, you better stop growing because if you get too tall, the king's going to come get you, put you in his army. Now let's talk a bit about the formation of an absolutist state in Prussia. The Soldier King said that everything must be committed except eternal salvation. That belongs to God, but all else is mine. It's kind of like they say in the Marines. You can give your heart to Jesus, but ... Look it up if you're curious, something about something belonging to the core. We've already discussed in another lecture how absolutist rulers had to contend with entrenched institutions that limited their power, such as the church, the nobility, representative bodies, and education. And each absolutist dealt with these institutions a little bit differently. Now, first of all, the church. The Fredericks were Calvinists, and they were governing a predominantly Lutheran country. And what they decided to do was to endorse religious toleration, to at least tolerate Protestants, at least let people be Lutheran or Calvinists. Now, as far as Catholics and Jews, maybe not quite that tolerant until you get to the time of Frederick the Great, but at least Protestant toleration. Now, what does this do? This weakens the state church apparatus. When there are multiple religions, then you don't have this unifying factor. So people would unify around the Prussian state rather than a single Prussian religion. Now, while Louis XIV decided to put the nobility down a notch, the Fredericks decided to cooperate with the nobility, to bring them in as partners. These nobles were called Junkers, the most famous of the Junker service nobility being Otto von Bismarck, who is the architect of German unification. And so these guys are brought in as a service nobility to command the military and to serve in positions of civil service. And in return for the nobles serving the kings of Prussia-Brandenburg, they were allowed free rein with the peasants that were under them and were able to dominate these serfs. So the nobility, they're brought in as partners. Representative bodies, not so much. Frederick William, the Great Elector, got the authority to tax by decree. So therefore, these representative bodies, whose primary role was to consent to taxation, were not a big deal in Prussia. And finally, the education system, which really distinguishes Prussia from other countries. In the United States today, we take public education for granted. About 90% of Americans are educated in public schools, but this is a product of Prussian absolutism. The Fredericks set up the first system of compulsory public education, where everyone in the kingdom had to go to a state school in order not only to learn how to read and write, but also to learn how to be a good citizen, to become a good servant of the state. And then nobles, the Junkers, were required to go to the Prussian military academy to learn how to assist the Prussian kings in commanding armies. This education system, of course, catches on throughout the Western world, but it originated in Prussia, the idea of compulsory public education. So by allowing religious toleration, by enlisting the cooperation of the nobility, by limiting the power of the representative bodies and being able to tax by decree, and by establishing a system of compulsory public education, the Fredericks established one of the most successful absolutist states in early modern Europe. And keep in mind that what distinguishes Prussia more than anything is militarism. Remember that the focus is on building an army, building a militaristic state. Keep in mind, I've got some other lectures. Subscribe to my channel if you like what you heard, and stay tuned for more video lectures in European history and a lot of other good history as well. Until next time.